Good morning from the Brussels studio of the EU Pavillion at COP27. My name is Christine Müller. I'm working for the European Commission, and I warmly welcome everyone connected to our online session, Optimizing Climate and Food Action via Open Social Innovation, the case of farm food climate in Germany. This session is meant to further develop the contents presented in a previous session in the EU Pavilion this morning, featuring the UNFCCC Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance. That previous session was succinctly titled Optimizing Climate and Food Action. In the coming 60 minutes, we want to better understand, based on evidence from Germany, how more complex food system change can be brought about on the ground, and what this means also in the context of the Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance. Without revealing already too much, I can say that community and consensus building are important ingredients in the process. I'm thrilled to have with me in this session 4 dedicated Farm Food Climate or FFC speakers, and these are Vanessa Stettenbauer, Nicolas Barthelme, Ursula Arztmann, and Ivo Degen. The session is completed by Dr. Alvin Chandra from the UN Environmental Programme, UNEP also being a member of the Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance. The session setup is meant to follow a question and answer format. So it's up to me to introduce the speakers and ask them questions, and it is up to the speakers to enlighten us in their area of expertise. Without further ado, I would like to call on our first speaker in the session. It is Vanessa Stettenbauer. She is the strategic lead of the Farm Food Climate Challenge. Vanessa is from southern Germany and studied chemistry in the UK. Afterwards, she worked for many years in the venture capital and investment managing world, before moving back to Germany to take on the role as strategic lead of the newly formed Farm Food Climate Mission. It is almost 3 years now that she has been building, guiding, and supporting Farm Food Climate. Vanessa, Farm Food Climate was launched in 2020, around the same time as the EU Farm to Fork strategy. Can you briefly explain how FFC goes about changing food systems? What are your ingredients for impact?
We really appreciate being here today. As you mentioned, we were founded around the same time as the European Farm to Fork strategy came out in 2020, which gave us sort of the momentum, together with a lot of other also German food system reports that came about also in the same time to launch Farm for Climate. And those policy strategies or political strategies, they really illustrated the need for food system change for us. And we also had a range of scientific papers like Eat Lancet, right, that also clearly show what has to happen within the food system. However, for us, it was always clear that none of these reports really show how this change comes about or how solutions can be implemented, how we can get there. So we initiated Farm for Climate at that time through an NGO in Germany called Project Together. And that was a movement sort of implementation to figure out how these strategies and goals politically can be implemented, right? And we do that by bringing together stakeholders from the society, from politics, and from business. And it's really all about bringing them into a collective and into a coordinated action towards implementation. So yeah, I guess how to explain it is really bringing solutions to this unknown path towards an implementation within the system, right? And that could be solutions that are built by farmers, in solutions built by NGOs, startups, even solutions built by technologists. And it's then all about sort of pragmatically testing them and seeing if they fit, where they could fit within the system, and how we can work with the stakeholder of the system to have them implemented in a grander scale. And very importantly, so a lot of the times in the food system, it's not just going the technology route or going the venture capital route. which I guess previously you said is my background really. It's not as easy in this sector as figuring out technological solutions to something, figuring out how to get venture capital money into this and just scaling it. A lot of the times, obviously in this sector, which has subsidies involved and other political constraints, it is a lot harder finding sort of the solutions to a topic. And that's where I guess a system approach comes in, right? And over the years, the NGO Project Together, to which Farm for Climate belongs, contributed to a term or a methodology, I want to say, called open social innovation. Open, obviously, in this case, means a broad participation. Many people, many different stakeholders. Social, meaning we focus on the grandest challenges in our society, and obviously the way we eat, the way we plant is one of our grandest challenges at the moment, and climate being another one. And then innovation, talking about sort of the fact that the solutions need to be novel and effective, right? And especially the word open in those three words is fundamental to the approach. You also mentioned the word community in the beginning. We integrate a diversity of change makers along the entire chain of the food system. Initiatives, scientists, corporates, politicians, civil society actors. And we also recognize from the beginning that sort of focusing on one food system aspect alone is not sufficient. And instead, we need to think about the system as a whole and recognize places to intervene in the food chain and do that in a coordinated fashion, right? And then through bringing all these actors together, we actively promote collaboration, cooperation, because obviously the best ideas arise when we all think together, when we all act together and work together, right? And that's why building and supporting alliances is one of our big foci at the moment. And I guess making the loop back to the farm to fork strategy now. So the approach really is filling the strategy with life through collaborative solutions, finding and then the implementation of those. And obviously, one important aspect for that is making sure that the important stakeholders in the system are involved. And in Germany, which is our first sort of playground, or has been for the past 3 years, the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture was one of the most important players, and they actually now fund us as well. And we've built strong relationships. Maybe let's take one example of what one of these alliances or pathways towards implementations can look like. And I guess no better topic than better nutrition for our children, or the topic of youth, which I know is a big topic for you as well, Christine. We at the moment are sort of looking at this missed level playing field chance, I guess, within the food system of better child nutrition. And this could be an entry point into working with the food system, which contributes both to better nutrition, but also to general food knowledge in the next generation of our children, right? And so the topic is getting there through school and kindergarten food. Within school and kindergarten food, we have a policy basis, right? We have the EU Child Guarantee, which covers, among others, at least one free healthy meal per child, per school, per day. And for instance, in Berlin, the Senate has actually already made this funding available to schools, though not every school has access to this kind of food yet. It's wonderful to see that this obviously political opportunity or funding opportunity exists. And it's wonderful to see that cities like Berlin are already following it, though we're far away from a proper, I would say, widespread implementation of that, right? For every child to receive a healthy meal per day under hopefully the planetary health sort of principles, right? So this would be a point for us where we say, okay, this is something we can do something with, or we want to be involved with, and then we can help build or support new solutions in this alliance for better child nutrition. And we're currently bringing together stakeholders in this topic with experiences in canteens, with the planetary health diet, EU, national, regional policy knowledge, among others. And the goal really is to explore where in this chain, right, to provide children at school or in kindergartens with better nutrition, we're lacking solutions, right? Do we have to build solutions for better supply chains for this kind of food? We'll hear from some initiatives later who are working on that. Or do we need to make better recipes available, right? That's another point in the chain where we're currently falling flat. Do we need to have children learn more about this and maybe even feel like they can decide or have more of their own decision of what comes on their plate? Do we have to support cities in making this funding available faster? Do we have to support schools in preparing test phases? Like there's so many places in this system where we're currently falling flat, and that's really, or blockers in the system, right? That's really where an alliance could come in, coordinating all the different activities of solutions and stakeholders on the different parts of or places of the chain, and that's really what collective action is for us, and that's how we want to go about changing the system and changing our food system.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for these truly enlightening statements, sharing with us the key insights into the FFC recipe of success and illustrating your approach with convincing examples. Now, I would like to turn to Nicolas Barthelme. Nicolas worked for many years in sales and marketing for brand manufacturers in the food industry. At the end of 2018, he discovered the idea of the French consumer movement, C'est qui le patron? And was immediately hooked and decided to bring participation and transparency for consumers also to Germany. In June 2019, together with 8 other consumers, he founded the initiative Du bist hier der Chef, die Verbrauchermarke, which means, in English, you are the boss here, the consumer brand, which aims to bring transparency in food quality and price, and to guarantee farmers fair revenue. Nicolas, learning from your experience with Du bist hier der Chef, your new consumer movement, what role does participatory decision-making play in addressing the questions of our time in relation to the thematic focus Vanessa just laid out? I fear Nicolas is muted still. Could there be a solution to
Sorry,
unmute?
I'm here. Does it work yet? No. Yeah. Okay. So good morning and thank you for the short introduction. My name is Nicolas Barthelme and I'm the co-founder of Du bist hier der Chef, a consumer initiative and a consumer brand. So we decided to bring democracy and transparency to the food system. Why? Because democracy is a quite powerful tool to drive change, not only in political issues, but also in economical issues. So we developed and set it up a participatory decision-making process to co-create food products and decide together as consumers what is important to us when it comes to food. Du bist hier der Chef, you are the boss in a nutshell. It is we consumers have the opportunity to decide about quality and price for our products together. But why is it so relevant and important for us to decide together? Because we as consumers have rarely transparency about the food products we buy. Because we have no control about the system we support with our purchases. Because we do not know whom is our money working for. Because we do not even know if the producer and farmers can live from their work by producing our food. So lack of transparency is not an option anymore for consumers. People want to be able to take responsibility on one side and to consume on a more sustainable way on the other side. So how does it work? Yeah, we develop online questionnaires to design the products we want to buy. So we invite thousands of consumers to decide about quality, about origin, about packaging, revenue for farmers, and much more criteria. Do we want local food or food from another regions of Europe? Do we accept the use of chemistry in the food production or not? How much animal welfare do we want? Do we want to guarantee a fair income for farmers so that they can live from their work or not? Do we want to have a neutral carbon footprint for our products or at least for our packagings? We answer the questionnaire, we choose the relevant quality, we see the impact of our choices on the price of the products, and we co-decide about the value shares along the production and the supply chain. So after evaluating the mostly picked answers and selected quality, we start looking for partners. Partners are farmers, our manufacturers, our retailers, who can produce our products as voted, as democratically decided, and bring them with us on the market. So we are a bottom-up initiative. We are consumers. we are part of an international consumer movement that started 2016 from France and is now active in 7 countries in Europe. In Germany, we found a lot of support within the farm food climate community, and we're proud to join other change makers to build up a new food ecosystem towards a sustainable agriculture and food production. So maybe now focusing on the youth topic of the conference. We need better food for kids and children, that's obvious, but we also need to educate these kids to become better consumers as we are. So why not bring both goals together? And maybe we have a solution. Maybe we have a vision building up on democracy and transparency. Maybe it's the way to transfer children more knowledge about agriculture, food production and nutrition. Maybe it's the way to enable children to be more conscious about food. Where does the food come from? Which quality differences are possible? Is my food fair to nature, to animals, to farmers? What is important to me as a future citizen or consumer? Our way is also letting children experiencing farming, cooking and climate protection to better understand the links between these topics. And at least by empowering them to take part of the food decisions, for instance, by co-creating school menus, by influencing diets and food procurements, by supporting the transformation of the food system and agricultural production. So these are the topics and projects we are working on at WCR Chef. We are developing contents and digital tools for better education and for better food, and for more empowerment for children and consumers, to deploy co-creation and transparency, to share knowledges, to recover the control about our food and about our consumption as empowered consumers. So let's co-create the new food system we all want. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nicolas, for having made such an impressive case for transparency and for a participatory approach. And I would also say an anticipatory approach. Considering your statements on the merits of empowering youth and children, by enabling children to become more conscious about their food, these children will also develop a better understanding of their regional and local food system. They will understand where their food comes from, how the whole system or certain aspects could change, with which implications. Vanessa, where would it make sense to arrive in terms of desirable school food ingredient sourcing?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a nutritionist, obviously, but all we can do is strengthen what science tells us, right? So we need a much greater diversity of plant-based foods. That much is very clear. And we are currently consuming too much of the same. That is also very clear. We need a huge increase in consumption of healthy foods, nuts, fruits, vegetables. You all know it, right? Legumes. And obviously that needs to go along with a reduction in animal source foods, saturated fats, refined grains, processed foods, sugars, etc., right? The way we currently eat, we know, is both unhealthy for us and for the planet. And that's where, again, this whole food system approach comes in, sort of, right? It's important that we start making sort of a stronger link between what is needed on the plates and in our stomachs and how we cultivate, right? We need a stronger connection between what's healthy and what's being produced. And if we create a greater demand for more diverse legumes, for example, right, vegetables, for example, through the quantities that schools and other canteens require, we might have a possibility to influence the agricultural landscapes around us. And that's an example, a really beautiful example, I think, of how social and ecological goals could move together into the right direction, right? And don't get me wrong, like, it's not saying consumers need to change right now, because I think it's very unrealistic without the education that Nicola just described, right? Just to say, oh, it's all the fault of the consumer, they just consume wrong. That's not a sort of realistic view of how we can pragmatically go forward, right? I think consumers buy what they see in stores, right? And at the same time, farmers at the moment tell us, or I've heard it in so many conversations, oh, there's no demand for this, right? Obviously, because consumers don't see it in front of them at the store, they don't buy it, they don't have that, there's, right? It's kind of an impasse, like every side says the other side has to move first, right? So I guess using this example of the food for our next generation, or the food in canteens, it doesn't only have to be children, it could in the future future be hospital canteens, it could be company canteens, right? If we use this eating together canteen approach, we do have a chance of creating demand of something and giving the farmer sort of a reason and a plannable, I guess, income opportunity to cultivate more diverse legumes, for instance, right, regionally, for that demand, where currently demand doesn't exist. So I think that's a really beautiful connection that could increase security, I guess, for the farmer, and then the collaboration also between the farmer and the region that he or she is in.
Vanessa, for having outlined your suggestions on what is needed and how it could be achieved in practical terms. Now I would like to call on the next two FFC speakers, and these are Ursula Arztmann and Ivo Degen. Ursula is an environmental specialist and entomologist. After 20 years of working in the corporate world, Ursula replaced her business suits with boots and started working with nature. While working on a farm in the Brazilian rainforest for 2 years, she got to know syntropic farming, which works in favor of natural processes. After that experience, she founded the organization Soul Food Forest Farms and Rizelio, which support regenerative agriculture. And now to Ivo Degen. Ivo is home in the impact startup world, where profit and impact go hand in hand. He knows Project Together in farm food climate very well from the inside through having worked at there for 4 years. He left Project Together to found his own company called Climate Farmers, which aims to scale regenerative farming globally. Now, with the bespoken focus on growing healthy foods, let's give the word to our two speakers that have been practicing regenerative farming for many years now. Ursula and Ivo, how does your work support healthy, climate-resilient food systems? And how does FFC's approach help you?
Thank you so much, and a pleasure to be here. And also congratulations to the amazing approaches that are present here. I think we really need all of this, and this is the beauty of the Farm Food Climate Challenge, that we have these diverse approaches that lead to a more healthy, resilient food system. I think the first thing I would like to say is that health is incredibly complex, and that goes both for our human health and for the health of soil. The health of ecosystems. What we've seen in the past centuries is an attempt at transferring our industrial thinking to health, right? Where we structure our approach to working with soil or working with health by sort of very, taking things apart and working with indeed in individual aspects of the system, which has some positive and some negative effects. One of the positive ones is that we produce much more food. We produce more food even than we need right now in the world. New cultivars, more specific fertilization, even more CO2 in the atmosphere, all lead to higher yielding plants. At the same time, there are now a number of studies, such as, for example, of the University of Texas in 2004, which show that we have significantly reduced nutritional contents across the bank. So this is minerals, this is vitamins, this is sort of all the different aspects of nutrition. It's not only these factors. Also, if we think about our gut, which is in the end the center of our health, a human body consists of about 10 times more bacterial cells than human cells, the majority of which are found in the gut. And these bacteria, this microbiome, is very, very connected to the soil microbiome. So we are basically looking at a very parallel system of bacteria, fungi, viruses in soil as in our gut. And same as in ecosystems, also in our gut, diversity is essential. Basically, having more gut biodiversity improves the health of an individual. And then what we see is that the diversity and the health of the soil biome contributes and is necessary for the uptake of macro and micronutrients. So basically, only through really a healthy soil, that is an alive soil, that is not treated primarily with synthetic inputs, but sort of lives in the interaction of the different bacteria, fungi, etc., can we really produce healthy food that is rich in macro and micronutrients? So we see that works as well in plants and also, for example, in meat production. We have a much higher density of omega-3 and a much better balance of omega-3 and omega-6 acids in meat that is produced from healthy soils. So what we see right now is that we have an agriculture system which produces these results, which we call regenerative agriculture. And that's a system that builds soil health while producing a good average of yields. What we're observing is that focusing on soil health does not only increase consumer health, does not only improve the availability of healthy produce that is rich in nutrients, but also improves the profitability of farms. So we have focused our agriculture a lot on yield. So we try to optimize the amount of food produced, and this is what we incentivize farmers for. But yield is actually the wrong metric for a farmer. You can produce a lot of yield with a lot of costs initially, and so even if you have a lot of yield, you might end up with a very bad profitability, which is the case for many farmers. So what we're looking at is a system that optimizes the natural uptake of nitrogen, the natural availability of soil nutrients, and therefore a reduction of external inputs. So this makes farmers more resilient to fluctuations in the market, an increased resilience of the plant itself due to better health of the plant, and in the end, a higher quality product. And while it's often claimed that a regenerative system would likely reduce yield similarly to an organic system, what we actually see in the preliminary research is that the yield is the same or even higher per hectare as in a conventional system. And so what we do with climate farmers is to work with farmers Europe-wide on the implementation of regenerative agriculture for increased profitability and ecological and economic resilience, seeing that the climatic situation for farmers is really becoming worse, and also the market situation, seeing at the prices of fossil produce is just going to continue improving and rising. So what we do on the one hand is to provide access to agronomical know-how, community and financing for the transition, and working with a scalable offering that allows hundreds of farms to participate in this program across Europe. But if we want to scale regenerative agriculture, we don't only need to work with individual farms. We need to work with supply chains, and we need to work with the mindsets. We need to work with the metric systems that we use. We basically, as an organization, even if we are hopefully successful, we are going to be able to work with tens of thousands of farmers, let's say 100,000 farmers. But we need to talk about millions of farmers that need to be ready for the climatic and market changes that are coming. And this is why we need to talk about work on the system level. And this is really where the Farm Food Climate Challenge platform of Project Together comes in. We, as an early stage startup, we are doing a lot of work on the system level. We have organized the first European conference on regenerative agriculture, really bringing the entire grassroots movement in Europe together. But this is not actually something that an early stage startup usually does. So this is where we collaborate with Project Together and where we can be much more effective through that support that we are receiving, really being part of this much bigger system, much bigger movement, and really benefiting also through an open social innovation approach. So sort of improving the system and benefiting as an individual organization. I think this is the amazing potential that we have here through this open social innovation.
Thank you, Ivo, and thank you everybody for being here. I would like to pick up that thread that Ivo has woven so beautifully. By using a bioregional approach, we bring this regenerative agriculture to regions, to places where people come together, where they have heritage, history, culture, because we have learned by building up lighthouse projects that we need to bring together the whole food system on a small scale so we don't lose the systemic aspect of it and actually turn or support this transition on a local base. So Resilio does that by orchestrating the change process on a bioregional level. We do this by supporting farmers in the shift to regenerative, in our case, mostly agroforestry approaches, and by bringing in this cultural aspect that we, as consumers, as local stakeholders, can come together and create islands of well-being, where we can show that on a bioregional level, we can future-proof the food system, including our schooling system. Because on this level, we integrate all stakeholders and we co-create and facilitate the visioning of a new place, which includes the food system and which includes schools. And we do have one project where we do this specifically with children and with schools, which is in Portugal. And projects like this are basically born out of Farm for Climate. What Farm for Climate lives on a large open social innovation platform, we take it down to place and start somewhere, as in this school in rural Portugal, where children actually, together with us and the local stakeholder, which is called Sementes Association, we are currently building a school garden with them, which is based on regenerative principles. So they're not only getting food supply, which is regenerative for eating healthy, they actually learn with their hands in the ground how to build up these systems, how to steward the systems, how food plays a role in cooking and bringing people together and creating culture locally. And we're supporting this with a children's book. We came up with stories and narratives being so central in changing people, in changing places. And this children's book has 4 books in total, where the hero of the story basically explores regenerative farming, the food system, system thinking, ecology. And the 4th book is especially a guidebook for teachers. So it's not only a story, it can be put into action. The teachers can help setting up these systems, and children can steward these systems live in their school garden, making their schoolyards greener and healthier for them to live in. We currently have applied for funding to create these books, and we're like very high up in the ranking already. We're still looking for a little co-funding, and we keep our fingers crossed that with this groundwork that was born out of Farm for Climate, that we can change something on local level, take what we can learn from this process and bring it to other places and replicate the concept. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ivo and Ursula. What you just explained was very rich, systemic, and makes a lot of sense to me. Vanessa, back to you again. Now we have learned how FFC aims to transform food systems and heard the voices of those that bring the FFC spirit to life. Vanessa, can you give us a glimpse of what is needed now?
Absolutely. I think the discussion here is showing us the benefits of collaborating and working in communities. And you mentioned earlier, in strong communities where we have a similar vision, and most importantly, where we trust one another, right? So it is very crucial for us to connect the different stakeholders together and work with the best ideas and solutions that come out of the testing. And our initiatives, as shown today through Nicola, through Ursula, Ivo, thanks so much for being here today. They're all situated like along the whole food chain, right? And we're working closely with a variety of stakeholders, and that reminds us every day that we cannot purely focus on the consumer side or just the farmer side, right? Where we have to think in this whole system, think about nature, think about farming, processing, distribution, consumption, and so on, right? Like Ivo said earlier, work with these supply chains. So one glimpse into the future is to really focus on this community approach of making sure that all of the different aspects of the food system are involved in a discussion, and that there's trust between the different players. And that is especially important for, I guess, my second glimpse on the future, and that is our focus on alliances, on proper collaborations that are that are going into action together, right? Because most of the solutions there are so complex in that when we look into the canteen example again, right, there are so many things along the value chain that have to be built, that one startup alone or one NGO alone with one serving or one product cannot really build a solution here, right? But all of the different solutions need to sort of coordinate for combined solutions, just so it works along the value chain. So many of our initiatives are building solutions that are preparing to work in a different system. Another interesting glimpse is that we continuously focus on supporting initiatives and alliances in those places where the current system falls flat, or where the current system, I guess, does not self-generate properly, right? And obviously, many of our solutions, for instance, need the subsidy system to change, right? And I think that's a very common sort of, I guess, opinion of a lot of the people that are within our community. So we do try to focus on those places where the current system doesn't have place for, let's say, an easy business model, right? But where we really need to fight together for a change in the political structure, for instance, or in other like regulatory places, etc. Right? And also another glimpse, I guess, what that also means is that we really need to give solutions the time to build out, to figure out how to maximize impact without the need for fast, easy scaling, without the need for a easy business model that has a hockey stick growth opportunity, like they say in the venture capital industry. So that's not the reality within a sector which is this complex, and again has this many regulations or subsidy structures in place, which make certain things not profitable over others and which skew the market in a way, right? So yeah, a really important point is to recognize the importance of funding possibilities at the early stages that are quick and experimental to really test lots of different things, but then also later on when things have gotten initial, I would say, positive feedback, to really give them the time to build out more complex products. I mean, look at what Resilio is doing, or what Ursula just told us. Obviously, these regional models are incredibly complex, and they don't follow the build something, make it perfect, and just scale it out easy venture capital model, right? So imagine a future in which solutions have the time, can really focus on maximizing impact, not just profit, right, before they find that business model. And one of our strategies or glimpses into the future, I guess, like you said, is bringing more patient, more philanthropic money into the sector, but not in the typical sort of foundation project-based funding kind of way. So you tell them you will do this and then you will exactly do that, but rather in sort of a taking the venture capital model in some ways as an example, in order to be agile, to change things that you said you're going to do because you found maybe a better solution, right? And we call this philanthropic risk capital. So money that comes in that's patient, but that also leaves the founder to really decide on a daily basis through the build, measure, learn approach, like they call it in the startup world, what the best solution is, right? Without the money being bound to certain activities. So basically one big other thing for us is to really work with foundations in Germany at the moment, but also a couple of more international ones, and really help them rethink how their funding model could have more impact by letting these, I guess, system founders or strong startups and NGOs that are thinking system develop solutions in their own way. And one fourth one, and I think the second last one on my list here, would be working more closely with political stakeholders. That's also something that the startup world doesn't do a lot, right? It's not very common for startups to work with cities, for instance, or to really understand the political system around them. On the different, in Germany, we have a federal system, obviously on the different federal levels, but that's exactly what we do, trying to create a feedback loop between what's being decided on political level, what are the reports coming out, what are the recommendations that are coming out, and then trying to figure out how exactly that could be implemented through bringing together the different solutions from the startup world, the NGO world, from science, right? And then testing and then figuring out that way back into the system, right? And this wonderful feedback loop is something we're working on very closely with the federal ministry in Germany. And it's also the reason why Cem Özdemir is now sort of the patronage, was taken on the patronage for Farm for Climate. And we're very curious and excited, I guess, to see how that collaboration will unfold over the coming years, right? So working with the political system, another one. And the last one, I guess, is going to be turning the model international. We have heard earlier from the Climate Resilient Food System Alliance of the UNFCCC that we've been in initial discussions with, that we're very, very interested in working together more with. We have a couple of ideas of how to internationalize our model more. We started obviously very rooted in Germany and rooted in the regional system, and I think that was very important. I think Ursula explained that earlier as well, right? To start with the food system on a regional level and then sort of learn things there and then build playbooks and understand how that could maybe work in other regions. But every time you have to rebuild it a little bit towards that culture, because every place is different, right? So it was important for us to be rooted nationally in the beginning, but we're very curious, and we have one first alliance together with actually climate farmers, with Ivo, who was speaking earlier. That is the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture. That's our first stab, I would say, at working more internationally with the alliances. And again, the Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance is another example of where that's going to unfold. And I think a right step into that international direction.
Many thanks, Vanessa. Now we can better appreciate what has already been done by FFC and what you suggest to come next. Related to this, I'm very pleased to introduce our last speaker in the session, and it is Dr. Alvin Chandra. Alvin Chandra is a climate change specialist from the Pacific Islands with more than 18 years of experience in climate change, international development, and environmental management. His current professional interest centers on ecosystem-based approaches and socio-political dimensions of climate change adaptation, loss and damage, the utility of community-focused interventions, and climate change policy negotiations. Much of his recent work has focused on Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Islands. Dr. Chandra has specialist skills in supporting UN intergovernmental processes under the 3 Rio Conventions, UNFCCC, UNCCD, and UNCBD. At UNEP, Alvin heads the Global Adaptation Network and leads work streams on adaptation policy and partnerships. He holds a doctorate in climate sciences from the University of Queensland, Australia, and published widely on adaptation, loss, and damage. Alvin, your curriculum is breathtaking. We could not have found a better, more relevant expert to complete our FFC session on climate resilient food systems. Now, Alvin, from what we've learned about the German farm food climate challenge approach to food system transformation, what do you think about it in the context of the Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance?
Thank you for that warm welcome, and also for the introduction. It was very nice hearing Vanessa and Ivo and Ursula and Nicholas. I mean, very inspiring, Vanessa and Ivo, in terms of the work that you're doing. I am speaking to you live from COP27 in Sharm-el-Sheikh, where adaptation and food systems has been quite a core focus, with a dedicated day by the COP presidency. And Vanessa and Ivo, of course, just reiterating some of the things that, a crucial part of these food, farm, and climate should be the smallholder farmers. And perhaps, the fourth element that I would add to the food, farm, climate would be the crisis element. And this is quite important if we are to build inclusive food systems across the globe. So we are coming, this conversation is, of course, happening at a very right time with the war in Ukraine, global supply shortages, the COVID pandemic, a multi-year drought in the Horn of Africa, unprecedented floods in South Asia. We've had severe summer heat waves in the Northern Hemisphere to a point to mount climate risks. And we are seeing these shocks across the food chain, and particularly for the most vulnerable communities. So, over 80% of smallholder farmers that live in low and middle income countries. And this is one of the key focus that I would like to bring to this conversation in terms of driving the crisis element and the vulnerability element to the food farm and the climate movement. And many of the solutions, Ivo and Vanessa, you've talked about, these are brilliant solutions. But to scale up these solutions for the most vulnerable people, you need finance, and you need finance to make this happen. At UN Environment Program, we are supporting quite a number of initiatives across the globe, and particularly for the most vulnerable countries in least developing countries, in small island developing states in Africa. And here we find, as part of national adaptation programs, agriculture, food security, and water. These are the top key priorities for countries. And to make these priorities into realities, again, you need resources. I'm very encouraged by the kind of thinking that the Farm to Food and Climate Coalition is building in terms of micro enterprises, getting youth involved, schools, to a point where maybe, yes, as Vanessa mentioned, looking at options, different options for menus that could stimulate discussions on changes to diets. The UN Environment Program recently released the emissions gap report and the climate, the adaptation gap report. One of the things that we find is that food systems account for 1/3 of all emissions, and we can reform these food systems to deliver on lasting emissions and deep emissions cut. And agriculture is also the largest user of fresh water, as much as 70%. Then, of course, if you account the energy systems into it, the food supply chain accounts for 30% of global energy use. So the systems perspective is quite important over here. And therefore, the changes that are needed in terms of scaling up solutions that Ursula, you were also talking about, would include demand-side dietary changes. It includes solutions like regenerative agriculture, conservation agriculture that Ivo, you talked about, and also improvements in food production at the farm level. But also an important part of the conversation is decarbonization of food supply chains. The transformation in these areas use emissions drastically in terms of about 1/3 of emissions could be reduced. So these are evolving conversations, very very deep conversations that we're having at COP27. Certainly on the Agriculture Day, we have Adaptation and Agriculture Day. We have seen new perspective in terms of bringing the food systems dialogue, the conflict dimension, addressing climate risks across the agriculture value chain. And one of the things that's happening this week is the political will and the need to increase adaptation and mitigation investments in the agriculture and food systems space, particularly for the most vulnerable country. And just to end, yes, we are facing very challenging times, particularly with the current crisis. This shouldn't derail international efforts in terms of increasing efforts on adaptation and mitigation. And here, speaking from COP27, what we are advocating as an alliance is the political will should generate long-term investments. Certainly from the Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance, we are very encouraged through the farm, food, and climate movements, and we look forward to our engagement, particularly with new ideas and new solutions that would help increase momentum in this space. Thank you for this opportunity.
We are very, very grateful for your recognition and reflection about the Farm Food Climate Challenge from Germany. You have given the FFC efforts an appreciative testimonial, steering and encouraging FFC actors on their way. We are now able to see how the FFC approach fits into the Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance in the context. And the information shared during the session by Vanessa, Nicolas, Ivo and Ursula and Alvin provided us with more detailed insights on how the implementation of open social innovation, a participatory approach to food system transformation, can work in practice. Personally, I also see a close conceptual connection to the food systems dialogues organized under the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit and the follow-up actions. At this point, I would like to thank all the speakers again for their contributions. I would like to thank our wonderful online audience for their interest and attention, and last but not least, the EU Pavilion organizers, the technical team, for this unique opportunity of exchange. The session is closed. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.